This bonus and not usually scheduled day video is going to be a bit on the ranty side. There will be some educational stuff about trigeminal neuralgia, but it's mostly going to be about my experiences with pain management and how it sucks. I do have to acknowledge a couple things here. So first is I am going to sound a bit first world problems for part of this video because I'm going to be complaining about my insurance. And I didn't always have insurance. So undergrad and grad school, partly, I didn't have health insurance. I couldn't afford it, so I didn't have it. So complaining about the insurance, yeah. The other thing is I'm going to be complaining about pain medication. And I know that we're in the middle of just a huge opioid epidemic right now. I know. And I know that a lot of people are dying needlessly from this. But on the other end of this, I feel like we're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And a lot of pain patients are kind of being thrown under the bus here. So if you're dealing with an addiction or have lost someone to this, I'm very, very sorry. But yeah. Trigeminal neuralgia, or TN for short, is a chronic pain condition. So you have a bunch of nerves running from kind of the base of your skull to the front of your face, and the trigeminal nerve is one of them. It goes sort of along here and then comes forward and innervates sort of this stuff. And in trigeminal neuralgia, I should just say TN because it's easier. There's something wrong with that nerve and it hurts. There are two types of TN, typical or atypical. In typical or classical or type 1 TN, you have these short pain bursts almost, where it's a sharp lancinating pain and it sucks and it hurts really bad and it's brief. So each little pain burst can last a couple seconds to maybe a couple minutes, and then it goes off. But this pain episode can go on and off for a period of time. Atypical trigeminal neuralgia involves chronic pain. So the chronic pain is somewhere along the nerve and it just always hurts. And it's kind of like a dull burning pain instead because your nerve is messed up. It is possible for a person to have type 1 and type 2 or typical and atypical TN. And I've seen it written somewhere. I'll hopefully have a reference for you guys on this, but I've seen it said that a person can start off with typical trigeminal neuralgia, where you have the sharp lancinating pain for short periods, and then over time it evolves into that plus the atypical chronic pain. In general, this tends to be seen in older adults, but it can happen younger than that as well. It can be due to compression from a neighboring blood vessel because, brilliant design, you've got nerve right next to blood vessel, and if the blood vessel does something weird, suddenly you're compressing that nerve. It can also be due to multiple sclerosis, damage from a stroke, or good old-fashioned trauma. Treatment options for this are medication to manage it, surgery to try to fix it or at least temporarily deal with it, or other more woo-ish options that are supported and covered by insurance for reasons I'll never understand. Final thing I'll say about this is it's been described as one of the most painful conditions a person can have. And you read the title. To spoil it, I'm talking about it because I've got it. So typically, at this point, I've got the atypical plus typical, so I've got the constant on pain as well as the brief pain episodes punctuating it. And so my pain pretty much sits back inside here where the nerve is, and it hurts all the time. So if I'm not medicated, it's hanging around like a 4 or 5 on the pain scale, and medicated, it gets down to about 2 or 3, and that's for that constant pain. The breakthrough pain or the episodic pain or whatever you want to call it starts here, and I can kind of tell when it's coming, and then it radiates up, back behind my ear, and kind of down a little bit. And sometimes it'll just hurt in my teeth. It's weird. And so the more intense, shorter pain episodes can get up into the 7 or 8 territory. The more severe pain episodes recently can last as long as 12 hours if I'm being particularly unlucky that day. And it's not just constant that bad. Like, it'll be on and then go down to like a 6 and then up to like an 8 and down to a 6. And the longest I've counted of it being on is something like 20 seconds. So it's like really bad and then not quite so bad and then just for somewhere between a couple to 10 or 12 hours. So I wrote this all out, but I'll try to keep it briefer than this. I went through my entire history, but there was a lot of false leads or dead ends before finally getting the trigeminal neuralgia diagnosis from probably the best doctor I've ever had. The best I can figure, this started after I got my wisdom teeth extracted. So I don't know how proportionally obvious it is, but I have a huge head, but a tiny mouth. And all 4 of my wisdom teeth were fully impacted. And if you haven't had the pleasure of going through this, that means that the oral surgeon had to go through bone to get my teeth out. And I think in the process of doing so, nicked a nerve or did something that messed up the nerve on this side. It's hard to know exactly when the symptoms started because the onset was pretty gradual. I do know, looking back behaviorally, that I stopped really liking wearing headphones so much, or at least as much as I could avoid it. For a long time, I was in a WoW raiding guild, and that necessitated the use of a headset if I wanted to not have to use push-to-talk. And I went through so many pairs of headphones and headsets trying to find something that wouldn't hurt. And initially I thought, just this one's uncomfortable. This one's pinching my ear funny. This one's not sitting on my head right. But over time, it became apparent that it's just anything sitting on or being in my ear is a problem. And it's gotten to the point in the past 3 years, probably, that like wearing sunglasses for too long can set it off. So the early days of it was really when I started grad school, and it was the norm in our department for grad students to just sit in their offices wearing headphones, and again, went through countless pairs trying to find something that didn't hurt. And so initially it was just uncomfortable. And then over time that changed into not just uncomfortable, but actual painful. And then I think the first really bad pain episode I had, I went to the student health center. And I've kind of described the pain where it's just very intense, very painful, very awful. And so the nurse who was seeing me decided that the best option to do with this person who was experiencing severe pain in what I thought was my ear is to go in with one of those ear examination things, brood around, and I started bawling. It was awful. It was awful. And she told me all this pain, the worst pain I'd ever experienced, was because of a pimple in my ear. Had a couple more, went back, got diagnoses like, it's allergies, it's another pimple, it's an ingrown hair, even though they couldn't find one, just absurd diagnoses. And I should mention at this point that I'm kind of over student healthcare clinics associated with universities because of my experiences, but also one of my research assistants who went to one with a cough. She was sent home, just cough drops, rest, whatever. Turned out she had pneumonia and she ended up in the hospital because they couldn't diagnose her right. Anyways, so I'm getting fed up with this happening and nobody really giving me a solid answer, so I bring my husband with me. Nurse starts to go digging around in there again, and I'm like, no. And just shaking, in pain, can't think, and my husband's like, Something needs to be done. You guys aren't doing it. We've been here too many times. She needs a referral. So I get a referral to an ear, nose, and throat guy, get an examination. Nothing's obviously wrong. He's listening to my entire history and like, okay, maybe it's temporomandibular joint disorder, TMJ. So I go back to try to get a referral to see the TMJ specialist guy, and I find out it's not covered by insurance. If I want to, I can fork out $1,000 to go see him on a $16,000 a year stipend, so dead end for the time being. As I've mentioned elsewhere on this channel, my husband's postdoc was in a different country. The entire time we were there, 4 years, we were on a waiting list to get a general practitioner. Never got a doctor. By this point, I've kind of got a handle on what triggers it, so the wrong types of touch, toothbrush in the wrong place, earphones, cold wind, and if you remember the Peterson Rule 3 video, I lived somewhere very cold, so there was a bit of that. So I would have these pain episodes, but, they lasted a couple hours and it just sucked, but it was something I could deal with. And these pain episodes would usually hit after I'd been up for some time, like they wouldn't tend to happen in the morning. Then one Wednesday in 2014, I wake up in excruciating pain. And of course, it's a day I've got to teach. So something that happens when I'm having a severe pain episode, and I don't want to demonstrate, I'll do it on the other side, is I end up holding it. And that kind of almost makes it not hurt quite so bad. And so I taught an entire section of intro and my cognitive class like this, the entire class. And I apologize profusely to the students. In that amount of pain, it's hard to think straight, but I got through, I think. And went home, tried to sleep it off. It continued through Thursday, and it woke me up Friday morning. So it's like, all right, this is weird, this is different, something's wrong. So my husband takes me to the ER, because that was the only way to see a doctor. And thankfully, there was nobody there at 5 or 6 in the morning. See a doctor right away, give him the history as best I can, and he gives me a shot of morphine. Instantly better. He gives me a prescription for Dilaudid and sends me on my way. Dilaudid is one of the opiates or opioids, I don't remember which, but it's a pain reliever. It's a heavy-duty pain reliever, I should say. And after that point, I've had chronic pain. Before then, I would just have the pain episodes, but it would go back to normal in between. After that, I've had chronic pain kick in at a 2 or 3 level medicated. If it's not medicated, it's at like a 4 or 5 these days. The ER doctor gave me a referral for a TMJ specialist because that was the best idea we had at that point. So I see the maxillofacial specialist. I get the full 360 head scan, all of that stuff, and he's just like, it's not TMJ. The pain's in the wrong place. So my pain on this side is back behind here. The joint for TMJ is up here. So there's a bit of a location problem there. Of course, this guy wanted to treat it anyways like it was TMJ, which involved a $1,000 mouthpiece. And oh, by the way, TMJ isn't covered by your insurance, so that'll be $400. Pay now. Another dead end. Great. Fine. Not going to be treated. Fine. Husband's postdoc ends. We move to oil country USA, and I find a doctor. And this was the amazing doctor who took his time and listened. And in the intake meeting where, you just give the general stuff that you've been through and everything, I talk about the nerve pain. Well, what I now know is nerve pain. It's like a cold burning. And I described it that way consistently. And the nurses at the grad school were like, that doesn't make sense. It's like, bitch, what do you think happens when you put an ice cube on your hand? How would you describe that sensation? So it's a cold burning, it radiates, it's sharp and stabby, all this stuff. And he's like, that's nerve pain. Give me a sec. And he disappears for a couple minutes, comes back and is like, you've got trigeminal neuralgia. Like, thank you. At that point, that was something I'd been dealing with for almost 10 years. and I finally have a diagnosis. Thank you. So, we talk about treatment options. He starts me on gabapentin and Percocet. Percocet is oxycodone plus acetaminophen in certain ratios. So it's one of those contentious pain meds. The gabapentin is sort of like a gold standard treatment for nerve pain. A lot of times if somebody has neuropathic pain from shingles, they'll be put on gabapentin. It's relatively safe. So we're trying the gabapentin. It's not really doing much for me, but the Percocet was helping. So we changed from the gabapentin to something called Tegretol. It's also called carbamazepine. I know this because I had a bad reaction. I'm on it for some time, and I start feeling like death. Like I'm having to drag myself everywhere. I'm bruising. It's weird. And around the same time, I also see a neurologist about it, because let's get a confirmation on this. There's one neurologist in this town, and quite frankly, he was awful. He was very old-fashioned. He didn't listen to me. He was right. I was wrong. I didn't know what I was experiencing. I didn't look like I was in pain. Therefore, I'm not in pain. So he started me on baclofen, which is kind of like a nerve or a muscle relaxer. And it's not really doing anything for me other than giving me muscle twitches, but I'll get to that in a sec. Anyway, so I'm on Tegretol and I'm on baclofen, and I feel like death warmed over. Around the same time, I have a physical with the good doctor. And as we're doing the stuff, I mentioned like, hey, so I've got these bruises, and I've had a period that started like 10 days ago and hasn't stopped. He looks concerned and sends me off for blood work. I get a call the next day like, hey, so your blood work came back in and you need to stop taking the Tegretol now. Your platelet count is just above the threshold where we would insist on doing a blood transfusion. So stop taking the Tegretol and don't get in any car accidents. Great. Thanks, body. That's great. Stop taking the Tegretol, platelet count recovers, see the neurologist. First, I let him know, like, I'm not on the Tegretol anymore because I had thrombocytopenia or whatever it's called, the platelet thing. And he doesn't believe me. He's like, that's really rare. You didn't have that. I'm like, okay, it's in my medical records. You're welcome to look at my blood work. He leaves for a bit, comes back in. That's really rare. Like, I can't believe you had that side effect. I did. So then I tell him about the muscle twitches I've been having and how I don't want to be on baclofen anymore. He's like, oh, you really should just stick it out. It'll be fine. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not fine. And I don't remember if it was the first visit or second visit with him, but he had me do a nerve conduction test. And I don't know if you've ever had one of those, but basically they test the nerve conduction by running a current through the nerve and measuring the time it takes for the signal to pass. It hurts. It's not comfortable. I never want to go through one again. But I basically say I don't want to be on the baclofen anymore. He finally relents and is still just like, it's all in your head. It's not real. Whatever. Great. So that was the last time I saw that neurologist. So I get a letter from the doctor's clinic that they're not going to renew his contract. They're letting him go. He did not meet their expectations, and so his contract was not being renewed. I saw the nurse who was set to be his replacement, and she tells me that she doesn't believe in pain medication and sets me up with a medication for some types of migraines. I try it once. It doesn't help. And at some point, the doctor had given me his home phone number in case I needed extra help with this. So I called him. And I let him know what the nurse had said and what she'd given me. And he was like, stop taking that right away. You're only supposed to take that like maybe 4 times a month tops. Like that is not something to be taken every day, let alone several times a day. What is she thinking? So he writes me a letter saying that I'm a good patient and, I'm not a drug seeker or any of these things, and I've got trigeminal neuralgia, blah, blah, blah. Just a very nice letter to be able to give to future providers from his perspective. And that's about the best he can do. He suggests that I see a neurologist that he'd referred people to in the past who was about an hour and a half away. I see her, and the appointment goes horribly. In the appointment, she tells me that it's not TN because TN doesn't have chronic pain. There is no constant pain for TN. And she would not do the medication, she would not do the pain medication, but she set me up with Topamax. I took a dose, started shaking violently, and went to the ER that night. I also did a thorough literature search with my husband and pulled together 8 or 9 articles detailing the types of trigeminal neuralgia, the typical and the atypical, and hey, look, there's 2 types, and one type has a chronic pain feature, a constant pain feature. What the fuck is she talking about? So the next day I call her office back and ask to speak with her, and I'm told patients do not speak with the doctor. Great. So I ask if I can leave a message for her. Sure. And so okay, I had this reaction to the medication, it's not going to work. And I had these articles talking about trigeminal neuralgia, could I please pass them along to her? Nope. Patients do not pass information like that to the doctor. So that was the only time I saw her. I canceled future appointments. Not that stopped them from trying to reschedule me. Every couple months, I would get a call from their office saying, hey, you have an appointment in 2 days, please confirm. No, I don't. No, I don't. You guys just keep scheduling me, stop it. And this happened enough times. By the end, I was just like, look, you guys keep scheduling me for these appointments and it needs to stop. I'm not coming back. I'm not interested in having her as a doctor. Please remove me from your list. Do not contact me ever again. The phone call stopped, although I did get a letter letting me know that she was moving at some point later. Okay. So I'm desperate, debating how long it would take us to get to Mexico or Canada to buy drugs that way. I am desperate. And somehow I end up on some nurse helpline, gets transferred, and eventually I end up with an RN nurse case manager or something. And she was very helpful and very understanding. She was outraged that the replacement nurse would just tell me to fuck off basically like that, had a word with her, and got me a refill on the Percocet. It was a very angry refill, but it was a refill nonetheless and bought me some time. Around the same time period, just blind luck for once in my life, my husband was at the dentist and the hygienist and him were talking. And she mentioned that there was a different healthcare clinic in town that she used, and it was pretty good. So I check it out, and I get in with what I call my doctor nurse, because there was a shortage of doctors in this town. There were a couple other doctors, but you had to fill out an application, which I did, and I was denied. They didn't want me as a patient. So I end up with the doctor nurse. Doctor nurse was actually friends with the Dr. Awesome, and so we were able to continue treatment. He tried me on the gabapentin again. We get up to, I think, about half the dose that they wanted me at, and I'm just dissociating like crazy. I feel like I'm just floating outside of myself all of the time. This is not tenable. This is not livable. It's not going to work. So try a couple other things, have weird reactions. All right, fine. We'll keep going with the Percocet. I made it clear that, we were only here for a limited time period while my husband finishes off the experiment. All right, in your next place, get thee to a specialist who will be good and figure out then. Until then, we'll keep going with the Percocet. Which worked, although it was a little bit weird because I had to go in every month for the refills, or a new prescription basically. And have a drug test. Okay. And drug testing in the pain management sphere is twofold. On the one hand, they want to make sure that you're not taking things you're not supposed to. On the other hand, they're testing to make sure that you're taking the things you're supposed to, like you're not selling your meds. So $30 every month for peeing in a cup and getting a new prescription. Fine. And then a $10 prescription. Fine. And we move out here. I found a doctor, kind of randomly just picked from the website with the help of somebody on the whatever phone to do that. And I have my first meeting with him, give him the full history, and he's like, okay, let's get you an MRI and get you to see the neurologist. Later that week, I'm seeing the neurologist, like, okay, yeah, this sounds like trigeminal neuralgia. Let's try some other medications. He had me try duloxetine, which made me painfully restless. So again, not tenable, not going to do it. After the duloxetine, he wanted to try me on something similar to carbamazepine, doing a little bit of digging on that and cross sensitivities or tolerances and things. And hey, people who had a bad reaction to Tegretol tend to have a bad reaction to this. Nope, despite his assurances that it would be fine. Nope, not doing that again. So he's sort of done with me, which is fine. I get it. And wants to wean me off of the Percocet, reduces my dose a little bit to start that, and then refers me to the pain management group. Excuse me, not pain management, pain specialists. They're different things. So I have a consult with one of the pain specialists group who is about an hour away in good traffic. And he lays it out for me. There are surgery and other treatment options that they start thinking about or considering when the drug treatments have not worked. One is called microvascular decompression, or MVD. So with this, if you have that blood vessel impinging or messing with the nerve, what they do is they go in, remove a chunk of bone, and then separate and manually move the blood vessel so it's not touching the nerve anymore. While talking about this, he said that, what I've got does sound like trigeminal neuralgia, but you can think of TN, or trigeminal neuralgia, I keep changing, I'm sorry, as existing along a spectrum. On the one end, you've got the classical, typical trigeminal neuralgia, and on the other, you've got the atypical. And so the more on the spectrum you are towards atypical, the less the MVD will help, or some of these other options even. So MVD is not really a good option for me. Also, since it seems like this was kicked off by a physical trauma in my wisdom teeth extraction, rerouting a blood vessel probably wouldn't help. Another option is they pass a needle somehow through the cheek and kind of mess with the nerve further to damage it so that it's not being naughty anymore. This is typically a last-ditch option when everything else has failed, because you're basically ensuring that this nerve will never really sense again, and you might also, so you'll have facial numbness, but you also might end up with a little bit of paralysis. So not an option yet. Another treatment option he brought up was radiosurgery, and this is a gamma knife, so focused radiation to alter the conductivity of the nerve. This is something that they tend to do only in older adults because of the amount of radiation and the location of the radiation involved. So, since I'm only in my 30s, not an option. The last thing he brought up was the complex pain team, which is a team specialized in treating weird pain problems like me and mine. So I speak to somebody on that team, an anesthesiologist, who goes over what she sees as options. So she talked about doing a nerve block, which might just be the Botox, I'm not sure. But she said that had a 50% success rate. And what that means is that for 50% of the people, it helped, at least for some time. You might have to go back and get re-upped on it. For the other 50%, it actually got worse. So for about a month, you would be in constant excruciating pain. The other option is a ketamine infusion. And so with the ketamine infusion, you're kind of altering the way the nerve works. So you go in, and like I said, this was an hour away in good traffic, and it's not always good traffic. And you go in, you have this kind of low dose of ketamine infused into you for some period of time. I think it's a couple hours. And then you go home and you do that a couple times a week for a couple weeks, and the nerve pain should improve for some time. It's not a fix. It's a temporary fix. It's not a permanent fix. And the issue with this is it's a huge time commitment because it's an hour away, several hours, and then an hour back. Plus, that night, from what I've read, you're either going to be kind of out of it or you're going to actually just be physically ill. You do that a couple times a week for several weeks. On top of that, there's the cost. So every visit would be a $50 copay, several times a week for several weeks. That's a lot of money. Plus, with the distance and the ketamine, I wouldn't be able to drive home. My husband probably wouldn't be able to drive me, so I'd have to take a cab or Lyft or something, so that's just more cost. I can't afford to do that. At this point, I was still optimistic I could find a job in the area, and so it's like, okay, thank you for your time. I'll definitely keep these in mind, but for now, until I get settled into a job, I can't afford to do this, time or money-wise. So in the meantime, she referred me to the pain management. So main doctor, neurologist, pain specialist, specialized pain group, and now pain management. The pain management visit was an absolute disappointment. The doctor there, I felt like, again, wasn't listening to me. She went through this whole list of treatment options that I'd pretty much done. I had done physical therapy, I had done massage, I'd done group therapy, I'd done acupuncture even. I'm super pissed off that that happened to me in the other country, but it did, and it made it worse. The massage made it worse. Ultrasound made it worse. Physical therapy made it worse. Like, it's a nerve issue. Physical therapy, what is it going to do? There's not a joint here. So by the end of this appointment, she's kind of annoyed with me because she feels like I'm wasting her time. I know I'm annoyed. And so she's like, okay, well, why are you here? And I told her that, on this loop, I was referred to her by the specialist pain group because I couldn't afford to be out of commission for over a month. And that I needed somebody to manage my pain medication. It's the pain management group. You would think they do pain medication, but nope. It's at this point, $50 in, an hour in, she tells me that pain management doesn't handle prescriptions. That's going to have to be some other doctor, like your GP. Okay. So, have another appointment with my GP and bring my husband along because I don't tend to be listened to if he's not there. So in the appointment with my GP, let him know what's up, and he's like, okay, we'll have you sign this contract. And it's a standard pain medication contract. If you've ever had to sign one, you're only going to get pain medication from this doctor. You're not going to go drug seeking. You're not going to abuse the medication. You're not going to sell the medication, doing any of these things. Null and void, no medication for you. As we're going through this, he asks me if I've taken any illicit substances in the past period of time. Heroin, cocaine, marijuana. Oh wait, we're in California. That's legal now. Ha ha. That conversation, I thought that meant, oh, that's not on the no-no list. Okay, file that away for future knowledge. He tells me that I'll need to see him again in 3 months and that I may be randomly drug tested, including today. Okay, I passed. Fine. So 3 months later, I'm in that follow-up appointment as instructed by the doctor with my husband there, and he's like, why are you here? You could have just messaged me and I would have refilled it. Fine, okay. I have a problem with my knee that I needed to talk about anyways. Great. No drug test on that day. During this, or in this time period, it occurs to me, hey, I'm in California. I'm sort of being forced off the medication that works for this. I need to find something else. Let's try the medical marijuana option. Get me to a dispensary, try some stuff, and it kind of helps supplement. So another period of time goes by, 3 months pass, and I'm due for a refill. It's going to run out Tuesday. I'm messaging the doctor on Friday like, hey, I need more. And he sends me a message that he needs to see me before the next refill. Okay. That's not what you said last time, but okay. And so I try to make an appointment. His first available is Thursday. I run out Tuesday. I panic. Of course, I can't get a hold of my doctor, over the phone. So I'm calling the make an appointment line. And they're like, yeah, the first available is Thursday. Do you want me to pass a note to your doctor about the situation? And I'm like, yes, please. So as the note's being sent off, I am in full-blown panic mode. What the fuck am I going to do? And right, California. It's a state with marijuana. I've been trying it. It's been working, but the taxes are crazy on it. If this is something I'm going to be doing, I should get a medical card. I use one of the online services that's available in the state and end up connected with one of those doctors who do the signing off on this. It's kind of sketchy, but it works. So I'm super panicking. I'm shaking. I'm crying. And I get a call from the doctor and okay, so what's your situation? And I'm like, okay, well, I got trigeminal neuralgia, and she cuts me off. Approved, approved, approved. If I could give you 2 cards, I would. I'm sure you know that trigeminal neuralgia is in the top 10 most painful things people can experience, and I'm so sorry that you're experiencing that. We'll get to the card to you as soon as you can. You can use the code on the online store. Honey, we got you. And this continues the trend of people who aren't really in a position to directly help me with this being the most kind and empathetic. So a little while after that is done, and I have an order on the way because you can get it delivered to your house here because it's just insanity. I get a message from my doctor that, oh no, he meant before the next refill. He needs to see me. He's a great communicator, this doctor. So that appointment happens, and I bring my husband, and there's a drug test. Okay, I take it, and I don't hear anything back, so I think everything's fine. Cut to Friday. This last Friday, I'm recording this Monday night, so not 3-4 days ago, depending on how you count it. I get a message from my doctor. Your drug test came back positive for marijuana. We will not prescribe pain medication as long as there's marijuana in your system. Stop use of any marijuana products and retake the test in 72 hours. So that was Friday. I run out on Wednesday. In 2 days, I run out. So my weekend was a shit show. If you saw my Peterson rehab video, you may know that I took a psychopharmacology class in undergrad, and part of that is understanding the metabolism and excretion of drugs in the body. Book's right there. The metabolism of marijuana happens relatively fast, but the metabolites hang out in your body for a period of time well after you took the drug. It's not like alcohol where it just passes. So for marijuana, depending on your body fat percentage, so it takes longer in women, the metabolic products of THC can hang around for weeks. Weeks. He's having me retake a drug test in 72 hours. There's no way I'm going to pass it. What the fuck am I going to do? In the panic on Friday, bought some home drug testing kits from Amazon. They got here Sunday. tested myself yesterday and passed. Barely. And retested myself this morning before going to the lab to have the official test done and failed. And, like, I understand that urine is dirtiest in the morning or whatever, so maybe I was okay, but there's a chance I'm not. So on top of me freaking out, I'm also pretty pissed off with my doctor at this point. Communication has been very sparse and unclear. Like, he's not a man of many words in his messages, but that ends up leaving me not understanding what he's trying to say and panicking because I don't understand the situation, and then I look like a crazy person or addicted in a way that is not helpful because I'm kind of responding back like, hey, what's going on with this? I don't understand. Please, can you explain? And it's not good. And the communication also has tended to happen at a very last minute. As I talked about with the previous one, where it's like on Friday, he's telling me I need to see him before the next refill when I run out that Tuesday. Or with this, on Friday, telling me I need to retest 72 hours when I run out on Wednesday. The lab work, I was told, would take 24 to 48 hours, so who knows what the situation's going to be. To be charitable, maybe he had this information just in his to-do list about the failed drug test, and he got to it when it became relevant, and oh look, I failed. But, I mean, given the history of the timing and his communications, I don't know. Either way, I'm up Schitt's Creek. Given my history, it's probably not surprising that I was on the nurse hotline on Saturday trying to find out any information that I could. And the nurse I spoke to was very understanding, very sympathetic, of course, and told me, like, you'll probably be fine. Most doctors would want to just see a reduction in the metabolite level. But it's hard to say exactly what your doctor will do, and he may just have, a pass-fail mentality, and if that happens, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And I asked her if there was any sort of official policies or anything I should be aware of, and she said it's kind of up to the doctor's discretion. Some doctors are more understanding about this, and others, like mine, are more strict. And so she suggested that I could potentially get a different doctor, which is probably going to happen at this point. She also went on a little bit of a tangent about how it's kind of ridiculous that it's legal in the state, but the company has this sort of no tolerance policy on it. But again, highlighting that it's up to the doctor's discretion how much they enforce that. She also kind of echoed what I'd heard from my case manager some years back. It would be unethical to leave me with nothing, but that very well could be what my doctor intends to do. So yeah, I am absolutely up my own ass with anxiety right now. Again, if it's not insurance yanking me around about bullshit, it's a doctor. And really, all of this is just icing on the shit cake that is my trigeminal neuralgia. In addition to having that constant pain, the severe pain episodes have been more frequent and lasting longer. At this point, I kind of feel like YouTube or other sort of freelance jobs are the only work I can do, because I don't know exactly when these things are going to hit, and I can imagine an employer like Best Buy or Walmart just firing me when I need to take a day off because I can't work. And I'm stuck in a catch-22 now. My doctor wants me to stop taking the medication, the only medication that's really helped and hasn't fucked me over in some way, but doesn't want me to use the only alternative that I can afford to. What am I supposed to do? Depending on how the drug test went today and his reaction to it, this time next week I might be in withdrawals. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I understand that we're in an abuse epidemic right now. And I understand the drive for policymakers and people in charge to try to do everything they can to stop it because it's a lot of dead. But on the receiving end of some of this. I also don't understand how someone like me, who's been taking it responsibly since 2015, or somebody like my elderly aunt, who'd been on a different pain medication for 20 years, can just be stopped. Like, my aunt was just cut off. Just, no more, you're done. Have fun living the rest of your life with a severe pain condition. Sorry. Like, I don't get it. There's gotta be a better way. Anyway, enough pity party. I should have a fun video up this Friday, and then back to the normal stuff the following week. Hopefully. Like if you want to, comment if you need to vent. Patreon is always greatly appreciated. See you in the next video.